Hey guys, Brian delivers you the goods here. Just thought I'd return to you for this Iron Maiden album review tonight. Sorry that it took me a little bit to get around to this review. Just had some things I was doing for a little bit. But I was supposed to do this on June 12th, but I decided to release it for a June 13th release. So happy Friday to everyone. Friday the 13th, of course. So this is for Killers, their second studio album by Iron Maiden. So I'm going to discuss what I listened to for this 10-track record, which is like a 38-minute listen, and let you know my thoughts on Iron Maiden's next album, Killers. So let's dive into this album review tonight. Now it starts with the Ides of March instrumental, which is a good instrumental for sure, but I don't know how I feel about it. But some of the guitar work in it's pretty solid for the most part. So it did a good job in its own way as the opening track for an instrumental song with some interesting guitar riffs. And give me a second, I gotta pause the video. Sorry about that, guys. Had to pause the video. My mom needed my assistance with something, but to get back on track, basically, The Ides of March is a 4.5 out of 5. It's a good song in its own way as an instrumental track, but overall, I think this track did well for the opening start to the record. Then we get to Wrathchild, which is quite a disappointing song. I don't know, I just wasn't feeling for the mixing of this track. It sounded pretty off and terrible, honestly. And the way Paul Di'Anno was singing it, I think this song was trying to rush it a little too much. And the overall sound quality of this was pretty bad with how it was mixed and all that and produced. This track wasn't my favorite track, so a 2.75 out of 5. Murders in the Rue Morgue is another disappointing track that I'm not a fan of. I think this is another 2.75 out of 5. I was very disappointed with this one. I mean, it tried, but it just didn't land with the execution. With how Paul Di'Anno was singing this track, which may he rest in peace, of course, because I know he just recently passed away, like last October. So I just found that out recently. Um, in my comment section of the last Iron Maiden album review, which was the first album that I reviewed, the self-titled. But overall, 2.75 out of 5 for Murders in the Rue Morgue. It was sadly disappointing. And then we get to Another Life, which is kind of doing some samey kind of riffs with the guitar work and drum work, and it just sounds a little too fast paced with this track, and it rushes it a bit just to try to land with the execution. But overall, the sound quality is a little just not great, but not terrible in any way. So it's a 2.75 out of 5. Still a disappointing track for how it executed, but overall, a sad disappointment. Then we get to Genghis Khan, the instrumental, which is a good instrumental. I think this track did a little better as an instrumental track, so 4.5 out of 5. It's just guitar work and drum work for this track, and overall with the execution, I think this track did well for what it was going for. 4.5 out of 5. Innocent Exile is actually a mediocre track for the most part. It's not one of the worst tracks I've listened to for a Iron Maiden track, but it's fairly mediocre in its own way. And the way Paul Di'Anno is singing this did all right for the most part. So 3.75 out of 5. Not one of my favorites, but not one of the worst tracks on this record. It's listenable in its own way, but it's fairly mediocre. Killers, the title track, was actually a good song. I was really impressed with this one. I was surprised because I thought the rest of the record was kind of going to tank on its own, but we're going to talk about what I think of the entirety of the record and where I stand with it. But overall, 4.5 out of 5 for Killers. It did a good job in its own way. I mean, not the best track, but not the worst track. It's just a good song. Prodigal Son is a good track too for how it sounds. This is another highlight on the record that I can get on board with. And it sounded good with Paul Di'Anno's singing, and just the guitar work and drum work did fairly well. 4.5 out of 5. Purgatory is another good track. It's the second to last track on this. I am so sorry, guys, for pausing the video again. I didn't announce that I was going to pause the video. I just heard my mom talking, and then she was talking to me for a second when I was recording. So I'm very sorry that I blindsided you guys with pausing the video again. So with that being said, to continue where I left off, Purgatory is a 4.5 out of 5. Paul Di'Anno's singing is pretty solid for the most part, and the guitar work and drum work was executing pretty good for the most part. Drifter is the closing track to this record, and actually a good closing track. One of my favorite closing tracks on this record. So I was really impressed with the ending to this record. It did very well. Had a few bumps in the road, quite a bit of bumps in the road. And this is where I'm going to talk about what I'm going to rate it at the end of the review. But overall, I think this album, well, Drifter is going to get a 4.75 out of 5, of course. Song did pretty well and sounded pretty good. Overall, production, mixing, and execution-wise, to continue where I left off, basically, I think this record was disappointing. It was trying at the end of the album, and it was starting to sound interesting towards the end of the record. And then there were quite a bit of hiccups during the beginning of the record that really missed with the execution, for tracks 2, 3, and 4 being the very worst tracks on the record and just not sounding great. And it just, the melodies, how it was structured, how Paul Di'Anno was singing, tracks 2 to 4, like Wrathchild, Murders in the Rue Morgue, and Another Life were the most disappointing songs on the record. Everything else, it's listenable, but I would say this is a bit of a step down from the self-titled, and in a disappointing way. It's probably the least favorite in their discography, and it's gonna be the worst in their discography, in my opinion. So if I were to give Iron Maiden Killers a score, I know this is gonna be a very divisive opinion, but I'd have to give it a 5.5 out of 10. It's sadly disappointing, and I really would have liked this if tracks 2 to 4 didn't disappoint me. And I don't know why this receives great reception when it's not that great of a record. It's really impacted with like this punk rock, fast-paced sound. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. Like, the intro track was very interesting. Then it slipped up as you went to tracks 2 to 4. And then after that, it just started to pick up a little more. And the last 4 tracks on the record actually were the strongest tracks on the record. And the instrumental tracks were my favorite. Innocent Exile was mediocre, but it still wasn't a favorite. But it's in the middle with me. But overall, I think Killers was a disappointing record. Not from start to finish, but from the start, it messed up. Like, with 3 of the songs on this record being the very least favorites. And I really wish I could have gave it a 6 out of 10. But it's not deserving of that. So 5.5 out of 10 for Iron Maiden's Killers. It's probably going to be at the top of the ranking list, which I will do an Iron Maiden worst to best ranking list for Iron Maiden's albums. once I get done with their discography, the Marathon Studio album reviews of theirs. But I will return to you for Number of the Beast, I think is the next one. And then after that, we'll just keep going. Number of the Beast will probably be out Saturday the 14th. But until then, you guys have a good night, and thank you guys for watching this Iron Maiden Killers album review. I'm sorry that I paused the video many times, 2 times during this video. I hope you understand where I was coming from, but until then, um, I'll make sure not to pause too many videos that much anymore. But until then, I hope you enjoyed this album review tonight, and thank you guys for watching.